welcome to Author Nation. I am Melody Ann, your host. This is the podcast that's going to propel your career to new heights whilst you still getting enough sleep and relaxing time. So I can't tell you how much I am excited about today, because we are going to delve into the crucial topic of work-life balance for authors. I don't know how many times people come to me and like, well, I've been getting up at 4 to write my book. And I'm like, let's not do that anymore. So get ready for a lighthearted and captivating conversation that's going to be brimming with valuable insights to help you thrive in the world of nonfiction. And our mission here today is to empower you to create a profitable and fulfilling author journey. As a member of Author Nation, you have an access to a treasure trove of resources at authornation.online. Go check that out and get the resource that aligns with your stage. So let's get to it. Grab your favorite bevy, settle down into a cozy spot, and prepare to embark on a journey beyond the endless hustle. So our guest, Matthew Turner, is a British author who wrote his latest book, Beyond the Pale, on the back of interviewing hundreds of successful entrepreneurs, authors, investors, and thought leaders, as well as writing his own books. Michael ghostwrites both articles and books for other successful entrepreneurs and thought leaders in between spending time with his 2 children. Welcome. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. So I really want to start with like your history of the hustle. So have you always been a no hustle, or was there a hustle in your life at one point?
I think to an extent we are all stuck and caught up in the hustle. It goes much deeper than many of us can ever truly fathom. And I mean, let's face it, society at large is relentless these days. As human beings, we've evolved very slowly over a very long period of time. And in the last 100 years in particular, but I mean, the last 20 years, let's face it, society has just evolved at a relentless rate. So the hustle is here, it's around us, and I am certainly not immune. I've never been someone who has been pro hustle. I've never really understood about the whole burning the midnight oil, grinding the gears. That's never made sense to me. But in and out throughout my life, I've very much been caught up in working harder than I probably need to be, worrying more than I need to be, comparing myself more than I need to be.
Yeah. So were you raised in a home of no hustle, or were you raised in a home of hustle? And, how did you come to get to this place of no hustle?
I was raised in a home of, I suppose, just being unaware of the hustle. And I think that's the real danger of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's most people. Like some people, yeah, they may have been brought up very much with a high, hard work ethic, bat thrown upon them on a daily basis, work hard, work hard, work hard. And there'll be certain people who are brought up in a world where it's the complete opposite of that, the no hustle. But I think the vast majority is in the middle, where the hustle's not even on the surface, it's not even part of the equation. It's just not considered. And that's the dangerous part of it, because it's just there beneath the surface all the time, just encouraging you to compare yourself to others, encouraging you to say yes to more things than you need to be, to try and pursue riches and wealth and this, that, and the other, simply because why not? And that's really the nature of the hustle. It's not just how much you work and how hard you work. It's just the relentless switched on nature that we're in. And as soon as you start working for yourself, or as soon as you do something ridiculous, like throw yourself into the book writing process, which, let's face it, and I'm sure everyone listening and watching to this right now can appreciate, it is insane. It's hectic. It's like, why do we do this to ourselves? And the hustle is very much part of it, because there's always something to do. If you're not writing, you need to be promoting. If you're not promoting, you need to be pitching. If you're not pitching, you need to be editing. There's always more than one thing that you need to do. So it's finding that balance, which is the tricky bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and you bring up a good point, because a lot of, and as I said in the introduction, I have authors coming to me who say, I know I have to get up at 4 a.m. and write for 3 hours before the kids get up. And my response to that is no, right? In writing a book, we don't want you sleepless. We don't want you eating bad food. We don't want you exhausted. Writing a book is a tremendous endeavor. It's wonderful. I sometimes compare it to climbing Mount Everest because it takes about the same amount of time, because it takes at least a year to prepare for Mount Everest, and it can cost about the same as well. So sometimes I compare it to Mount Everest, but it doesn't mean that you have to give up the essentials you need in your life just to write a book. So when you were writing your book, did you give up essentials to write it?
No, I had in the past, sure. You know, I mean, The Other Pale's my fifth book. And in the first
Mm,
four, I was always working on a fictional book and a non-fiction book. And I always felt like I needed to be writing one and then also been promoting and then working with clients. So I was spread far too thin. You know, the
yeah.
whole Tolkien quote of butter spread too thin on toast. That was me. And I think that's most of us. But Beyond the Pale, I took a different approach though, because I was about to become a father for the second time. I knew I wouldn't have the bandwidth. It
Yeah.
just wouldn't have been possible for me to do everything that I'd been doing in the past. So I had to take a conscious decision to say yes to less,
Yeah.
but to really focus on the things that I did say yes to. And Beyond the Pill was one of them, but I didn't give myself a deadline. I was like, I don't need to write, edit, and publish this book in the next year, which old me would have done. I was like, it's going to
Right.
take as long as it takes. And if it takes 2 years, 3 years, I'm okay with that. I'm going to enjoy the process. I'm
Yeah.
going to do what I need to do to provide for my family. I need to do what I need to do for myself, my sanity, my soul. And I
Yeah.
need to do what I need to do for the book.
Yeah.
And I'm going through a similar process right now with its sequel, Beyond the Horizon. It's been in a state of hiatus for the last year because I've been doing the research and I'm kind of ready to dive into it. But the timing isn't quite right. Part of that's down to the creative juices aren't quite there.
Yeah.
Part of it is just due to time and bandwidth and lining up the ducks, being
Yes.
busy with other work and client stuff. And
Yeah.
part of me feels guilty because I'm like, I need to write that book. But then the other part of me says, it'll get written. This is a long journey. And I owe it to the book and I owe it to the readers, I owe it to my family and I owe it to myself to look after me and to give what I need to give the attention it and they deserve. So I see
Yeah.
the book these days as a family member. When I'm working with it, it's not just this thing there to be used and abused. It's a family member to me. And I want to give it the attention it deserves. And if I can't give it the attention it deserves right now, then it's time to take a step back. It's there. As long as I keep fueling it and feeding it, it's all going to be fine.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to come back to that in just a minute. You know, the book as an essential part of the family, as a family member. But I just want to jump back for a moment. Was baby number two that defining moment that changed how you thought about things? Was that aha moment? Wait, baby two is coming. I need to reevaluate my entire life.
It, basically, yeah, nail on the
Yeah,
head. It was a real sort of existential period for me. I knew I was going to have to probably work half as long, like half as much, if
yeah,
for me to be the dad I wanted to be, because yeah, like I just did the math and I was like, the math ain't mathing. So I need to work less. And it's
yeah,
probably gonna have to be about 50% for a period, not indefinitely, but for a period, I'm
yeah,
gonna have to work less. But I also knew that I was gonna have to somehow earn at least double, probably triple what I was earning at the time to be
yes,
able to do the things which I wanted to do. Because it like one thing, you know, we were just moving at the time as well. So it wasn't just this one isolated thing. There was many things. So I was like, I'm gonna have to step up here. And it was a rough period. I was like, how am I gonna do this? To earn more, I'm gonna have to work more. I can't possibly work less because that has been drummed into me, because that
yes,
has been drummed into all of us. If in doubt, work harder. If you want to get more money, work
yeah,
longer, work harder, get a side hustle, etc.
yeah.
But I went on a process and I decided, no, I'm going to have to be very purposeful about the clients I say yes to. Probably raise my
Mm,
prices. I'm going to have to be very purposeful about the personal projects I commit to.
yeah,
And I'm just going
yeah,
to have to say no to everything else. Not necessarily no indefinitely, but just park it.
yeah,
And doing that within the space of about 3 months, I tripled my income and halved my workload. I was like, wow, it didn't feel possible but this is weird. Like, okay, I need to explore this further. And
Yeah.
I'd had the idea of Beyond the Pale at the time anyway. I was starting to question not necessarily my rolling hustle culture, but I was starting to question my pursuit of success, like what success meant to me. That's something that had been a common theme in one of my previous books, The Success Mistake, when I interviewed all those many entrepreneurs and thought leaders.
Yeah.
And the two then began to align. I was like, okay, I'd been defining success on other person's terms. I've been very much working longer and harder than I need to have been doing. And as soon as I stepped back from all that and said no, I felt less stressed. I made more money. I was working with better clients. I was working on more fulfilling projects. I just felt better. I was healthier.
Yeah.
And it didn't all just happen at once, but it
No.
was a positive domino effect where when I was able to look back after 3 months, then 6 months and a year, I was like, the progress here is amazing. Like, wow, I can't believe that's what I used to do.
Yeah. So do you consider, I want to talk about this idea of work-life balance, because you talked about your book as part of the family. And a lot of people struggle with this whole idea of work-life balance. And I think that over the past few years, I've seen a bit of a shift. You know, when we all started working from home, you started seeing more kind of children and cats and dogs and whatnot in the background on Zoom calls. And things became more, instead of work-life balance, it felt like there was a work-life integration for some people. So I want to just talk about this idea of work-life balance. I've also heard other people saying there's no such thing as work-life balance. Don't even try. It doesn't exist. So I want to know your perspective on, is there a work-life balance? Is it a work-life integration? What is your kind of take on all of this?
So integration is the word right there. And I was introduced to it a while ago now from someone I know called Ari Meisel. I did a video recently talking about how work-life balance is the myth. I think it was once upon a time, it was a tough thing to attain, but it was attainable because people worked in an office. People had more defined roles going back 60, 70 years. For right or wrong, if you were a man and you were a father, you went to work. And if you were a woman and a mother, you stayed at home and raised kids. It was more defined. There was a more set of rules and a blueprint of how to live life. And I think when it was like that, there was an attainable pursuit of work-life balance. Still not for many people, but it was attainable because there was a workplace, there was a home place. You were able to switch off. You couldn't bring your work home, right? For most people, because most people worked in a factory or in an office or doing something that they couldn't bring home. That just is not the case for the vast majority of people these days. Because one, the definitions around our roles as mothers, fathers, people, partners, everything changed. Expectations have changed. The online world has made it so we can work at home more often than not. And that's become now an expectation to do a little bit more at home. So there's no longer 9 till 5 for most. It's the lines have blurred to the point where the lines aren't there. So work-life balance is just a myth. It's a modern day myth. And if you try to pursue it, you're going to more than likely fail, which brings the word integration in. But I also like to go a bit further. Rather than having it as work-life integration, I call it whole life integration. Because when you put work and life next to each other, it paints a picture that your life is made up of work and then life. And there's not two. You get one life. So I call it whole life balance or whole life integration. This idea of integrating your one life. And that's fluid. It brings us to another important thing here. The idea that we go through chapters in life. So right now I have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old. My life right now looks different to when I had a 5-year-old and a 2-month-old. My life is going to look different still when I have a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And then eventually when they're 30 and 25, we go through chapters in life, not just due to the fact our kids grow and everything like that, but the work we do, the projects we commit to. the things that interest us. I mean, anyone listening, watching to this right now, just think about to who you were, what interested you, what you were committing to just 5 years ago. It was probably different. So life is changing on a personal level, but life on a macro level is too. Few of us could have predicted the COVID crisis, for instance, and lockdowns and all of that. Most of us couldn't impact and still can't really predict the impact of what things like AI are going to have. So life is just but a sea of chips. It's just waves in and out. So where you are right now and what integration looks like now is going to change. So all we can really do is be aware of the aspects of our life that are important to us right now. So maybe that right now involves a book. You're writing a book. Maybe you have a family. Maybe you have a particular client. Then you go through another chapter. You're no longer writing the book, but you're promoting the book. Maybe it needs more of your focus, less. All we can ever do is be aware of the aspects of our life that matter and then divvy up time and energy into it, because we only get what we get. Each week, 10,080 minutes. So what we do with that time is finite. There's only one of us. But it's folly to just try and live your life separated it where, okay, I'm going to be work Matthew, and then as soon as it reaches 6 o'clock, I'm going to be dad Matthew, and then when the kids are in bed at 9, I'm going to be partner Matthew. Instead, just trying to integrate so I can just be Matthew. That's the pursuit we should all be committing to, not balance. Just committing to an existence where you just get to be yourself. If you just get to be yourself, you're going to be who you need to be to the people you love. You're going to need to be who you need to be to that book you're writing, promoting, whatever. So that's where whole life integration comes in.
No, I love that. And so if you're out there listening and you want to escape the hustle, you can go to nohustle.co, nohustle.co. And I don't know about anyone else, but it's something that I want. I certainly don't want to be hustling all my life. And so, Matthew, it kind of brings me to the question of, and this makes me very curious, how do you define success? And then how do each of us come up with our own definition of success?
Well, that is the key, isn't it, right there? Because most of us, and I fit myself into that category, we pursue a version of success that has been placed on us by parents or maybe just society at large. And a true tipping point in my life, and I find in most people's lives, when they start to question, what does success mean to me? I think it's where a lot of, midlife crises come about. It's not a crisis as such. It's just a realization that you've been pursuing something for a decent chunk of time that you don't actually want, or at least you're starting to think, maybe I don't want it, or it looks a little bit different. So this idea of defining success on your terms is really important, because what success means to me is going to look different to you and everyone else. And all we can ever do is pursue what makes sense to us. So for me, well, one I've been, pursuing for a number of years now is this idea of financial freedom, not in the sense of having, millions, but I've been wanting and desiring to reach a point where I wouldn't have to think about money on a regular basis, because I find the idea of money stressful, but I also find it frustrating because it's just money. And we place far too much emphasis into it. And it clouds our judgment, and it clouds our dreams, and it's quite toxic when you step back and think about what money is and then the role that it plays in our lives. I'll say it again, the math don't math. So that's kind of been a big pursuit of mine. That's really where my version of success has centered around in recent years. But I feel like I'm going through a different chapter, and I'm going through a period now where I'm starting to take more steps back and, question like, what does it mean to me now? Like, does it still make sense? As before, we go through different chapters. So your definition of success is malleable. It's not set in stone. The version of success that if you go through this exercise at 25, you ain't going to necessarily be still needing to pursue that at 35 or 45 or 55. It changes. And part of that process is being open to that, realizing that what you now want is different to what once was.
Yeah.
And that is okay. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to grow. You're allowed to want different things. Go from left to right, back and forth. In terms of how to do it, a big tipping point is to just be aware of it and to allow yourself to have that, quote unquote, midlife crisis, to allow yourself to have that existential thought of, am I doing what I want to do? Does it make sense to me? And you're not going to come up with an answer straight away. I wish I could give you a 9-step thought. You could, in the next 10 days, enlighten. It's not like that. For some people, it can be an aha thing.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you ask a question, boom, answer. For many others, it might be weeks, months of just giving yourself the time to explore it and take a step back. And we're all different like that. Some of us are more tactical and rational, methodological, even that we have to go through it bit by bit. Others just like to sit back and marinate and know that you're not going to find the answer unless you allow yourself to just be. So you need to understand yourself, but it's just having that awareness of going, all right, do I want what I've been pursuing? Does it make sense to me? If I had it, how would I feel? And honestly, for most people, if you ask them and say, define your version of success to me, they won't give you a good answer. You right now, watching, listening, might not have a good answer. It might just be a particular amount of money or a promotion. Or if we're looking in the world of the authors, bestseller, New York Times bestseller, that would make me a success. Well, okay, let's say that was the case. Let's say that has been your dream. That's been what you've been pursuing for the past decade. You're on your 3rd, 4th, 5th book. And you've been racing toward that carrot, that is the New York Times bestseller list. Let's say you got it tomorrow. Then what? Would it change your life? Not necessarily in money that you would have and that and the other, but like how you approach life. Still right? Would that be it? Most people, when they start questioning that type of stuff, they go, there's more to it than I've really given itself credit to. And that's a shame, because our version of success is that compass. It's what we wake up every single day, and every single day we're bombarded with messages and options and choices. And we should be constantly referring to that definition of success. Like, is this a yes or is it a no? Is this going to take me closer toward it or not? And if you don't have a clear idea of that definition, and you don't remind yourself of it, then you're just hoping to hit the jackpot. Yeah. You may, but you likely won't.
Yeah. Thank you, Matthew. Yeah. I like that. I think it's a very challenging thing to really define success. It's personal, and it ties into, as you said, the chapters of your life, right? When you have small children, part of success is raising good people, right? When they're grown and gone, you're done that, and so success changes, right? So I really like that. Thank you. Let's talk about the book. I'm excited to talk about the book. And funny first question, I love the cover. So if you're listening, if you're watching out there, if you have not seen the cover of this book, you have to go look at the cover, because it is a beautiful shot in Alberta, Canada, which gorgeous place. It's Moraine Lake, a place where a lot of us like to hike. And if I've hiked, I love it. It's a gorgeous place. Why that image? What was it about that image that really just pulled you in to choose that, Matthew?
Well, first of all, thank you. And it's so great to meet someone who knows where it is, because I didn't. I didn't until someone pointed it out a while ago. I can't link. It was the publisher, one part of their design team. I obviously fed them certain information and what the book was about and what inspired me. They came back with different colors, and straight away that one just stood out to me. And it's been a standout. And what I love about it the most is I use the idea of climbing a mountain as a bit of an analogy within the book itself. It's not talked about so much in the book, although it will play a more prominent role in its sequel. But when I talk about the book, when I was writing the book, it kind of goes through 3 phases, as all good books do, right? And it's this idea of personal growth, and whether it's, you know, a personal thing or a more professional thing, growth tends to start with an awakening, similar to what we just talked about there, that awakening of questioning what it is that you want. And then if you decide to just keep your eyes open, then it begins the ascension up the mountain. And there's going to be lots of twists and turns. You don't really know where you're going. You might go up a bit of a dark alley and you've got to backtrack. But eventually, if you keep going, you reach the top. And that's this idea of acceptance and evolution. And you're able to look down the mountain and see the path you've taken and realize that you could have done this instead and it would have saved you some time. But more importantly, you're able to look back on where you once were and be like, wow, look how small it was. Look at that house, that house and that wood around that house that once felt so big and like it was my everything. And now I'm all the way up here and it just looks so small.
Yeah.
So this idea of growth is this journey up the mountain where right now, if you have an awakening, you develop that awareness, it will feel so unfathomable because where you are feels comfortable, it feels big, it feels safe. You can't really possibly imagine what's beyond the pale. So where the name of the book came from. But then you ascend and you climb, you keep climbing, you reach the top and you look down and you realize how small old you was. Not in a bad sense, but just in a sense of look how far I've come, look how far I've grown.
Yeah.
And it's the same with writing a book.
Yeah.
You start at the beginning, how am I going to get to the end? And you just throw yourself into the process and you ascend page by page by page, go for all those edits, go through the proofreading. And then you get to the point where you get to hold your book and you look back on the last year, 18 months, whatever it's been, and go, wow, look how far I've come. So the role of a mountain played such a huge role in me writing it. So the fact the designer brought it to life, it was very serendipitous.
Yeah, perfect. I'll tell you a little secret about that incredible lake. It's a mountain. It's a glacier-fed lake. It's gorgeous. Now, if you hike around it and then go off, you will actually hike up it's not a full mountain, but you kind of hike along a ridge and up and over this kind of, it's like a dip and a peak. And then you go down the other side. It's about 800 meters up maybe and down the other side. And if you hike along a trail, you get to a place called Paradise Valley, which I think is really, really telling in the sense of what you're talking about, right? You know, beyond the pale, where are we trying to get to? You're trying to get to this amazing place. Paradise Valley has what I call a step waterfall, where you have water and then it goes along and then it drops again and then it goes along and it drops again. It's this magnificent step waterfall. So just tied to that incredibly beautiful lake in those mountains is a hidden valley called Paradise Valley where I've hiked to and camped. It's a gorgeous place. So I happen to think it's a fabulous photograph for a book. Now, is this a memoir?
No, it's not. Well, people often ask me, is Ferdinand based on me, or how much is Ferdinand is in me? It's not autobiographical in any sense. Me and Ferdinand are very different. Certainly his rise to the top far exceeds mine. I created him to be this like exceptional overachiever, this person who we couldn't possibly, comprehend for a reason, because he's the sort of person most of us on a subconscious level admire and aspire to be like, because we assume if we get to that point, then you'll have no worries. And I wanted to show people that even when you reach the so-called top, you're still going to have the same worries.
Yeah.
In that sense, there's a lot of me in Ferdinand.
Okay.
So a lot of the questions Ferdinand asks, a lot of the angst he feels, a lot of the frustration he feels as he's meeting all the various different people and he's going on his journey. that's very much inspired by my own inner thoughts. And it's the one thing all my books have had in common. There's been some kind of defining question or yearning or wondering in my mind. And for me to even begin to appreciate what it is, I have to write. I have to write it. And I think that's one of the reasons I've not fully leaned into the writing of its sequel just yet, because I know what its question is, and it just doesn't feel intense enough internally for me to explore it. So I'm laying the foundations and research and exploring it in different ways, but the fundamental it of a book doesn't feel ready within me just yet.
Yeah, I love that.
And if that's not there, then I can't fully embrace the book, because it just won't feel raw enough. It won't feel like I'm in it enough.
Yeah, I love that. So Beyond the Pale, who did you write this book for?
Originally, I wrote it for millennial entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs is a very, blanket statement. Authors certainly fit into that. Anyone working for themselves. I've since changed that. That's kind of why I wrote it, because I was like, this is who I work with. I'm a millennial, an older one, just on this cusp, but I'm a millennial nevertheless. So a lot of the people I've worked with and connect with tended to be millennials, entrepreneurs. And I assumed it was our generation's problem. And I assumed it was more of a issue. And we're talking here the idea of hustle culture here, and this idea of what we talked about earlier, like work-life balance. I assumed it was more applicable to millennials and to people who own their own business or work for themselves. I've since realized that it's not just millennials. People older than me have certainly found a lot of value in it and have said, yeah, it spoke to me. And I was like, wow, okay. So this is affecting people older than me, and it's most certainly affecting people younger than me. And it's spoken to people in a similar way, or in the way that I hoped it would. People who had 9 to 5s, people who do have the office job, who do have probably as close to an attaining work-life balance as possible, still feeling the same pressures, the same stresses, everything. It spoke to them in the way I hoped it spoke to them. So I've realized it's for just people who just feel like they're stuck in it, caught up in it, working harder than they need to be, just not necessarily burned out, but feeling a bit too burned out.
Yeah. And that makes sense. I know I get it that, we used to think of the entrepreneur as the hustler, but, I noticed with my kids, their work, they're on these group chats for work, and people will message them at any time. Right. And so I feel like even people who are just working in an office or a restaurant or wherever, they can't escape work anymore, because they think you're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whether you're on and being paid or not. And so it makes perfect sense that office workers and everyone, who is kind of stuck in that hustle culture would be drawn to your book, right? So that makes perfect sense. Where can we get your book?
So you can learn all about it at beyondbook.co. And you can download the first couple of chapters for free. So I always encourage people to sample it, see if it's a book you'd like to commit to. And if you do, then there's links to it on Amazon. And obviously you can just search Beyond the Pale, Matthew Turner. And there's all the details about me and the No Hustle community. So beyondbook.co.
Perfect. So beyondbook.co if you're looking for the book. Matthew, thank you so much. As we wrap up, could you give us maybe from this conversation, the top 3 takeaways you'd like listeners or viewers to take from this?
Absolutely. So as soon as you stop listening to this, the first question you should ask is, am I pursuing something that I want to pursue? That idea of defining success on your terms. That's the first one. Second is questioning your relationship with hustle, not just how often you work or how hard you work, but the entire cesspool that is the internet, and the fact that you're constantly comparing yourself, whether it's on a conscious level or a subconscious level, to all those people you come across every single minute of every single day. Just question your relationship in the grander picture of the hustle. And the third thing is to just question work-life balance. To some extent, you've probably been trying to pursue it. Just question it. Go, actually, am I going about it wrong? Should I be integrating my one life rather than trying to split it into 2, 3, 4, or whatever else? So yeah, define success, question the hustle, say goodbye to work-life balance.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I really appreciate that. It was a great summary, 3 fabulous takeaways.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So thank you for joining us today. Really love having you here as always. So we hope you found the conversation enlightening and thought-provoking. I know I have. So don't forget to come visit us at authornation.community for advice, for community support, and honestly, so you don't land up waking up at 4 a.m. to write your book, because I actually think that's not the best thing for you to do. Writing a book doesn't mean subtracting from your family or your health or your life. Just as Matthew has said, fully agree. We value your feedback and your support. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave a comment or a review and share it with someone who will find it valuable. Keep writing, keep creating, and keep sharing your stories with the world.